Welcome my dear students. Today we are going to start the fourth lecture of sixth week. In the last lecture we covered issues related to multiple issues related to solid waste, the technologies basically involved for conversion of those solid waste to technology to mostly your energy, as well as we wanted to convert them to some of those useful material. And in today's class, we are just going to highlight mostly on plastics. And definitely there will be a domain of plastics there. And also we will try to understand that how this plastic is going to be a huge challenge for the humanity, as well as for the ecosystem. For rendering useful services of ecosystem services, this becomes a huge challenge. So we need to take this issue very seriously. So we will be covering those dimensions, different dimensions of plastics, as well as the challenges, as well as the the technologies which are available, particularly for converting this particular plastics to some useful resources. So as I mentioned that the categories of plastics, definitely we are going to look at the dimensions, different dimensions of plastic, starting from macroplastic, mesoplastic, microplastic and nanoplastics, as well as we will be also, as I mentioned, the challenges and those plastic, how we are going to work with that particularly plastic waste management interventions. As we understand that this plastic is basically derived from that particular word of Greek word which is plastikos, which is mean to mold. And these are non-biodegradable, and definitely it's a synthetic or semi-synthetic material, and where you can expect which is basically derived primarily from petrofossil feedstock and made up of long chain hydrocarbons. You can see those hydrocarbons, it's a long chain hydrocarbons, and you can see the simpler hydrocarbons here, and once you keep on increasing this chain, definitely you will be reaching to these. So these long chain hydrocarbons with additives and can be molded into finished products, excluding compostable, basically compostable plastic or polymer, which conforms as per your BIS standard ISO 17088-2008. So these polymers are basically broken in presence of suitable catalyst, metal or innovative into monomers such as ethylene, propylene, vinyl styrene and benzene, and these monomers are often chemically polymerized into different categories of plastics. And once we are going to classify these plastics in different categories, as I was mentioning, whether you talk about macroplastic, mesoplastic, microplastic, nanoplastic, definitely these are going to be based on the strength, very important parameter, then followed by your chemical resistance based on the prone of attack through your either acid or base, recyclability and temperature tolerance. This is going to be the four most important parameters which are going to distinguish them from each other. The first one is your recyclable plastic. Basically these are all your this PET, HDP, LDP, PP, PVC, polyvinyl chloride sort of thing, PS, etc. So these will come under your recyclable plastic or thermoplastic. And there are another group which is basically non-recyclable plastic or thermoset, and others are materials that cannot be reprocessed or recycled due to their chemical structure. Multi-layer and laminated plastics basically come under this category. PUF, bakelite, polycarbonate, melamine, nylon, etc. they will also be there. Now if you look at globally that these plastics, which I said a synthetic or semi-synthetic polymer, is almost, we are producing almost 450 million metric tons per year. So this is a huge amount, and out of which through packaging material, this is almost covering the major share, which is around 142 million metric tons. And if you look at that how and what is the status of different countries across the different continents, that how we are handling this particular plastic and how we are generating this particular plastic, definitely United States is always leading this list. it is producing almost 42 million tons. And if you look at the plastic waste per capita, this is also pretty high. And also look at, Brazil, although, if you look at the total plastic waste, it is low, but if you look at the plastic waste per capita, it is always high. And if you look at India also, so India is also, producing enormous amount of the plastic, almost 26.3 million ton. And if you look at the plastic waste per capita, this is almost 19.5 kg. So this is also, it's a huge amount. And if you look at this blue category, which are basically, whether you talk about Iceland and Monaco, these are few countries which, which generates very minimal or almost zero plastics, right? So now we will come to those different categories of plastics. So the first one will be definitely your microplastics. So these microplastics are teeny plastic material or particle, and having a dimension of less than 5 millimeter in size that originate from breakdown of larger plastics basically, and are intentionally produced in many a time for use in products like cosmetics. And they pose a growing environment and health concern due to their persistence and potential to accumulate in the ecosystem. That means they are mostly pervasive in nature. So once it is, going to accumulate over there, so the buildup is always going to be high in multiple years, right? And in the food chain as well. And now, if we look at among these microplastic, you have your primary microplastic, intentionally manufactured small plastic particles like your microbeads in cosmetics or exfoliating beads in facial scrubs. This is personal care products mostly, they are all personal care products. And plastic fibers from synthetic textiles. So they are generating these, primary microplastic. And secondary microplastic, these are formed from the breakdown of larger plastic items through either through the process of that particular, moisture, temperature, in the process through your weathering, fragmentation or other environmental processes. And if we look at this, where we can see that where do microplastic comes from? Basically, if you look at those different segments, you will be able to see that yes, tires are contributing the most, followed by your city dust, and then you have a considerable amount from your synthetic textile. So that means what I am trying to tell is, among this whole list, or where from, if we look at those categories where from these microplastics are coming from, so basically, there are these are mostly either your road markings, your marine coatings will be there, personal care products, I was mentioning particularly related to your primary plastic, right, and plastic pellets as well. So these are mostly, those resources, and you can see over here those primary source as I mentioned, and primary source as I said that these are all your intentionally, manufactured. And once we talk about the secondary source, so these are coming out from your decomposed product, means people are going to it's not coming straight away, but definitely through the process of decomposition or environmental process or environmental parameters which are very active to make those initial macroplastic or mesoplastic to finally to this microplastic. So we understand by this time that definitely once you have that sort of impact and stay period in time in your ecosystem, definitely you will have some environmental impacts. So they have significant environmental impact, particularly in different ecosystem. If you talk about soil, if you talk about water, if you talk about plant and animal. So these, if you just connect them, this particular continuum, in every ecosystem you are going to get this, whether it is your marine ecosystem, whether you talk about terrestrial ecosystem, I said soil, and airborne pollution and chemical contamination ultimately to your plant, as well as if it is coming to your animal system, definitely these are going to be based on your polymer type, environmental condition and exposure to your UV radiation. These will make those impacts sometimes magnified, and sometimes those impacts may be smaller, but this is going to be impacted based on these particular factors. So the first one I am going to discuss is your persistence, because these microplastics are slow to degrade and can persist in the environment for extended periods, from hundreds to thousands of years, you can imagine. So if it is staying at that particular with that particular momentum or with that particular capacity, definitely it is going to be a burden for our ecosystem. Accumulation, they can accumulate in soil, water, sediments, as well as in the bodies of marine and terrestrial organisms. I mentioned that particular, that particular chain, whether you talk about soil, water, plant and animal continuum. So they are always there. Ingestion, microplastics can be ingested by animals, and which are very, very, deadly, including fish and other marine life. And then that can potentially enter to your food chain. So definitely through that, definitely it can, biomagnify to our system as well. Bioaccumulation in a process that is going to definitely, as I was mentioning, biomagnification. So this is going to accumulate, right? Microplastic can absorb harmful chemicals, acting as carriers for pollutant, and as a matter of fact, if it is going to, be absorbed with them, so definitely it is increasing their bioavailability for a larger period of time. Health concerns, definitely research suggests that microplastics and the chemicals they can carry, may have a potential health impacts on human health, on human as well as animals. And there are long-term effects of this plastic exposure and human health are still being, studied, and people are conducting researches, and definitely we will be getting some more results maybe at the end of this season of this particular thing. By that time, we will be able to get more result out of it. Then the next category is your nanoplastic, right? Nanoplastics are extremely small plastic particles. Definitely it is going to be, if you look at the dimension, definitely you will be able to see millimeter, micrometer and nanometer. Definitely, it will be coming under in that particular category of the dimension, just like your DNA, right? DNA material. That means, or if you talk about virus, so they will be, in that range particularly. And these nanoparticles are, nanoplastics are extremely small plastic particles, typically less than 1 micrometer in size, and arising from the degradation of larger plastic objects, and are found in various environments, including your air, soil, water, or even within your organisms. And this is raising concern about their potential health and ecological impacts. Definitely this is going to make that sort of, ultimately, as I was mentioning, that these may be, their sources. And if it is coming to this particular plant and animal system, whether you talk about, zooplankton, bivalves, plants or aquatic organism, chicken and human exposure, definitely this is going to be, very, very deadly. And at the same time, these nanoparticle, once we talk about these nanoparticle like or nanoplastics, they have their characteristics of with their size, with their charge, with their polymer type and the stage of degradation and chemical composition, and then particularly corona formation. So they have these sort of attributes they all have. And sources and formation, if you look at the sources and formation, these nanoplastics are basically formed through the degradation and fragmentation of your larger plastic objects, whether you talk about macro, meso, as well as your microplastics as well, such as plastic bottles, packaging and textiles. And they can also be intentionally manufactured as nanoparticles for various applications as well, which can in turn can enter into that particular soil, water, plant, animal system. Potential risks, definitely, like your microplastic, these nanoplastics, they have also their potential risks and concerns. The small size of nanoplastics allows them to penetrate cells and tissues, potentially leading to various health effects. They can also act as carriers for other pollutants, which can be absorbed onto their surface and then enter the food chain because of that particular charge. Because when I was talking about their attributes, whether it is related to size, their charge and their corona formation, definitely these will come under that particular sense. The potential of this nanoplastic to disrupt the endocrine system and cause other health problem is a growing area of concern. Means if it is going to affect your endocrine system, definitely it is going to interrupt multiple physiological disorder within our animal system. And the uptake and effects of nanoplastics in humans are not fully yet known, but recent studies have documented that the uptake of adverse effect of these nanoplastics from the cellular to the community level, it can move to that in a very fast way. As these nanoplastics are the size range of particles that can be absorbed by cells, so research on these materials should be accelerated to properly assess their potential risks, because this is going to make things much more complicated in times to come. So once we have this idea about these, microplastic, nanoplastics and the other group of plastics, definitely there are multiple challenges, particularly with reference to the, plastic disposal. And the unregulated disposal, inadequate recycling and non-biodegradability, as I was mentioning, their stay period may be, 100 to 1000 years. So, and non-biodegradability of plastic waste lead to several environmental concerns related to air pollution, related to soil water contamination. If it is related to air pollution, definitely those fugitive emissions are released during the polymerization process. Manufacturing plastic emits harmful gases like your carbon monoxide, like your formaldehyde and volatile organic compounds. And these are very lethal, particularly if you look at, the health of the air. And burning plastic waste, including polyvinyl chloride, releases toxic emissions such as carbon monoxide, chlorine, hydrochloric acid, dioxin, furan, amines, nitrites, styrene and benzene and acetaldehyde, and these are all lethal compounds, and this can interfere with the ecosystem services as well as the functioning of many nutrient cycling process as well. And soil and water contamination. Indiscriminate plastic waste disposal makes land infertile, and toxic metals like lead and cadmium leach into your groundwater due to improper dumping of your plastic waste. And if it is going to increase in your soil and groundwater, definitely it is going to impact heavily on your plant system. And disposal and recycling challenges, because there are multiple challenges as well, because once you talk about these impacts on your air and your soil water system and finally your plant and animal system, definitely these multi-layered and metallized plastic pouch are difficult to recycle and dispose of. This is going to be a huge challenge. And thin plastic, they carry, and packaging films create collection and recycling difficulties. Soiled and mixed plastic waste hinders effective recycling and reuse, and plastic waste litters creates an unaesthetic appearance and clogs your drainage systems, and definitely this is going to be a huge issue, particularly during your rainy season. And already many metropolitan cities have witnessed that what can be the impact of this clogged plastics in their drainage system. And poorly regulated recycling industries is non-conforming areas release fugitive emissions and worsening air quality, and definitely if it is your air quality is being impaired, we have a very challenging situation to face. And these challenges, once I'm just going to continue with that particular challenge, definitely it's a high volume of plastic waste is being generated. We mentioned that almost 450 million tons, and India is also producing almost close to 30 million tons. So this high volume of plastic waste, globally enormous quantities of plastic wastes are being generated, and that straining waste or management system, definitely it is going to make a huge stress, particularly once you handle that particular waste, because you have a diverse wastes are being mixed, and definitely and segregating them and making proper use, and particularly being a challenge, particularly once you wanted to convert into some useful resources. Low recycling rates, contamination and insufficient infrastructure hinder your recycling efforts and resulting in low recovery rates. Environmental pollution, as I was giving emphasis on this particular part, that plastic waste causes significant environmental pollution adversely affecting your ecosystem and your human health, and need to a comprehensive strategies. Definitely we know to make or to revive this system, definitely we need some effective solution, particularly once handling this particular plastic waste, we need some sort of effective solutions, require multifaceted strategies and collaboration among stakeholders, whether it is in PPP mode, public-private partnership mode, or maybe many a time it is mostly dominated by those public drive as well. So, and once any country is going to take any sort of intervention in trying to address this challenge, definitely it's based on whether it is a developed country or whether it is a underdeveloped country. Based on that, things are going to be there. But there are few basic things which will be common in all the places. If you talk about the source, that plastic waste from household, buildings, stores and institution, so that has to be collected, and so that collection is being done by collectors and waste buyers. And then pre-processing and segregation, which is very, very important, and done by scrap shops and wholesalers many a time. And then recycling done by plastic processing and recycling facilities, and other treatment. This is whether we talk about those definitive treatment facilities, for whether you talk about brick lanes, landfill system. So that is always there. So if you look at the developed countries, so starting from their organized, you have a sources of that particular source separation they have. But particularly if you look at this particular underdeveloped or developing world, where you don't have that sort of organized source separation. And if this is a high waste collection efficiency, but here it is always a low waste collection efficiency. The technologies for treatment to plastic waste is always, you have enough of infrastructure is there, and technologies are also available, but we don't have that sort of either in terms of transportation, we don't have that sort of efficient transportation in place. And mostly in case of your developed worlds, incineration, and here it is recycling is being followed, and here engineering landfilling, and this is unsecured landfilling is being done. And once we have that sort of unsecured landfilling, definitely it is not going to help your your ecosystem to survive. So you have multiple issues are going to be evolved out of it, but these are all planned. Even if you talk about landfilling, definitely it is all planned. So these are the major differences between the developed world as well as the developing world. And these plastic waste management technologies, the improper collection and segregation of this plastic waste, pose significant environment challenges, as I was mentioning time and again. But while incineration is a widely used disposal method globally, but if it is being planned properly and if you have that sort of infrastructure, but it is not preferred in India due to the release of toxic gas like chlorinated dioxin and furan, which is going to impair your air health. And to address this issue, we need to explore innovative technologies for safer plastic waste disposal. However, effective waste segregation from municipal and other solid waste is always going to be a huge challenge. And once you are going for going ahead with this sort of innovations, definitely we need to segregate them first. You may have your plastic waste, but if it is being combustion, and if it is ultimately through that particular combustion intervention, definitely you will be able to come up with your energy. But in the process, definitely there are multiple gases like your volatile metals and hydrochloric acid, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, toxin, and other volatile organic carbon compounds. They will be also coming up. At the same time, some sort of polychlorinated dioxins will be also there. There will be polychlorinated dibenzofurans will be also there. So these are all toxins, and if these toxins are coming up, definitely it is going to create some sort of nuisance, as well as some sort of particulate matter with the size like your PM particulate matter size like your 10, contaminated with toxins, and heavy metals will be also evolved in that particular process. So these, once we are able to segregate this particular material separately, and even if we can do that efficiently, but still even after combustion, these are the consequences, whether you talk about gases, whether you talk about toxins, or whether you talk about those particulate matter is going to be there. And utilization of plastic waste in presently, particularly in road construction, is gaining momentum in the present context. Basically, what is the idea? The idea is the utilization of plastic waste in road construction is an innovative approach basically that addresses both waste management and infrastructure development as well. And in the process, what is being done is basically segregation and cleaning is done, and then it is being mixed, and then they follow the dry process as well as the wet process. That means once those plastic wastes are being separated and then clean and shredded into your small pieces, because this is very important, and then shredded plastic is being mixed with your heated aggregates and bitumen using either the dry or wet process. And that dry process is plastic waste is added directly to hot aggregates, and the wet process is plastic waste is blended with that hot bitumen, and then they are being used, those particular material is being used as a those composite known as the waste plastic aggregate bitumen mix. This composite is used basically for your road laying at temperature between 110 degrees centigrade to 130 degrees Celsius. So this is becoming a very, very important innovation, particularly in road preparation. So the advantages is all clear, that we wanted to prevent the stripping of those pothole formations which are very common, particularly in roads. Bitumen film is often stripped of aggregates due to your water penetration leading to pothole formation. But if we make that sort of combination with plastics, with this bitumen, definitely it is going to be a win-win situation. Vehicle movement accelerates this process. Polymer coating on aggregates reduces your water affinity due to its non-wetting nature. And resistance to leaching, this is very important. Polymer remains firmly bonded with that particular bitumen layer and doesn't leach out, and even after road construction using a waste plastic bitumen aggregate mix. And reduced bleeding in high temperature also. The waste polymer bitumen blend has a higher softening temperature, minimizing the bitumen bleeding during your summer time, when you can expect the temperature may be as high as 50 degrees or 55 degrees Celsius as well. So at that high temperature also it is not going to make any impact. And mitigation of fly ash impact, roads constructed with plastic bitumen mix help prevent the leaching of toxic compounds into your soil. Basically nothing is going to be, is going to percolate through that soil profile to your water, and ultimately, and this has been demonstrated through this particular picture, where you can see that, how this polymer bitumen mixture is going to give that sort of very important result. So if we wrap up that what we have discussed in today's class, so what we understand is that we discussed these particular components of your solid waste, particularly with reference to your plastic. We wanted to understand that what are the different classifications of plastics, and how these plastics are going to impact negatively into your ecosystem, and what are the consequences of this, if it is not being managed properly, what are the the negative consequences that can come up. And at the same time, we have also seen that yes, there are few mostly the approaches and the objectivities under your developed and the developing countries are always different. Very well structured mechanisms are in place, particularly if you look at the developed world. But if it is in developing world, definitely it's not that very planned structure is available. And even in developed world, the process of incineration is giving more emphasis. But at the same time, we have also seen this bitumen plastic mixture can be a wonderful solution, particularly for making or laying these these roads, and which is capable to withstand those heavy rains, as well as can make very smoother rides. So in the next class, we are going to further proceed this particular plastic issues with some more detail. So until then, thank you very much.